in American legal history. This story shows us what happens when federal arrogance meets state judicial wisdom, when someone mistakes their federal authority for unlimited power, and when a law enforcement agent discovers that even the FBI answers to the Constitution and the courts that interpret it. But before we dive into this incredible federal meltdown, less than 3% of you watching are actually subscribed, so please hit that subscribe button, because this story about jurisdictional boundaries and the consequences of challenging judicial authority with federal privilege deserves to reach everyone who needs to understand that no badge, no matter how prestigious, is above the law. It's a tense Monday morning in Providence Municipal Court, and Judge Frank Caprio is handling his usual docket of traffic violations and municipal infractions. The late autumn air carries a sense of urgency, and everyone in the courtroom seems focused on resolving their matters quickly and efficiently. At exactly 9:15 a.m., the courtroom doors open with unusual authority, and through them strides Special Agent Marcus Webb, a 42-year-old FBI agent with the Bureau's white-collar crime division. Webb moves with the kind of supreme confidence that comes from years of federal authority, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, his federal badge prominently displayed on his belt, and his entire demeanor radiating the superiority complex that federal agents often develop over local and state law enforcement. Special Agent Webb is here because 4 weeks ago, he received a citation for speeding in a school zone, 50 mph in a 25 mph zone during school hours, while driving his personal vehicle to a non-federal appointment. The fine is $400 plus court costs, but Webb isn't here to pay anything. He's here because he believes his federal law enforcement status should exempt him from what he considers local traffic enforcement that doesn't apply to federal personnel. What Webb doesn't realize is that he's about to challenge a judge who understands federal jurisdiction better than most FBI agents and who has zero tolerance for federal employees who think their badges make them above state and local laws. As Webb approaches the defendant's stand, his body language immediately establishes a confrontational tone. He doesn't remove his federal badge, keeps his FBI credentials prominently visible, and maintains the posture of someone who believes he's doing the court a favor by appearing at all. Special Agent Marcus Webb, the court clerk announces, reading from the docket. Webb steps forward with obvious impatience, his federal credentials catching the courtroom lights as he positions himself more like an interrogator than a defendant. Judge Caprio looks up from his paperwork with the seasoned eye of someone who has dealt with every form of law enforcement arrogance imaginable, including federal agents who confuse their investigative authority with judicial immunity. Agent Webb, Judge Caprio begins, his voice carrying the measured authority of 35 years interpreting both state and federal law. You're charged with exceeding the speed limit in a school zone, 50 mph in a 25 mph zone during school hours. This violation of Rhode Island state law occurred on October 22nd at 2:15 p.m. How do you plead? Webb's response immediately signals that this case will become a constitutional showdown, unlike anything the courtroom has seen before. Your Honor, Webb says, his voice dripping with federal superiority and barely concealed condescension, I'm pleading not guilty because this citation represents a fundamental misunderstanding of federal law enforcement operational authorities and jurisdictional precedents. Judge Caprio sets down his pen, never a positive sign for defendants who think they can lecture him about jurisdictional law. Agent Webb, were you conducting official FBI business at the time of the violation? Not at that specific moment, Your Honor, but as a federal law enforcement agent, I maintain certain operational readiness requirements and jurisdictional authorities that supersede local traffic enforcement applications. The courtroom becomes very quiet. Webb has just claimed that his federal badge exempts him from state traffic laws even when he's off duty and conducting personal business. Agent Webb, were you responding to a federal emergency or operating under federal directive? Webb's irritation becomes visible as he realizes he's being pressed for specifics. Your Honor, federal agents operate under different legal frameworks than local law enforcement. We maintain federal authority that requires operational flexibility, not subject to municipal restrictions. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change, but veteran court watchers recognize the signs of a judge who is about to deliver a constitutional education. Agent Webb, can you cite the specific federal statute or Supreme Court precedent that exempts FBI agents from state traffic laws when conducting personal business? Webb pauses, clearly not having expected to be challenged on constitutional law by a municipal court judge. Your Honor, federal supremacy doctrine establishes that federal law enforcement operations take precedence over local ordinances. The silence that follows is deafening. Webb has just misapplied federal supremacy doctrine while demonstrating fundamental ignorance of constitutional jurisdiction. But Webb isn't finished making the biggest mistake of his federal career. Your Honor, Webb continues, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. I've been a federal agent for 18 years. I think I understand how federal jurisdiction works better than a municipal court judge who deals primarily with local parking tickets and minor infractions. The courtroom erupts in shocked murmurs. Webb has just insulted Judge Caprio's understanding of federal law and suggested that municipal court experience is inferior to federal law enforcement work. What happens next is even more explosive. Webb reaches for his federal badge and holds it up toward Judge Caprio with obvious theatrical intent. Your Honor, this badge represents the authority of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States Department of Justice. I think that carries more weight than local traffic enforcement. Webb has just flashed his federal badge at a sitting state judge, implying that federal law enforcement authority supersedes state judicial authority. He has crossed a line that will destroy his career and create the most legendary constitutional confrontation in courtroom history. What Judge Caprio does next will systematically demolish Webb's federal arrogance and potentially end his FBI career forever. Judge Caprio slowly stands up from his bench, an unprecedented gesture that signals something monumental is about to happen. He removes his glasses with deliberate precision and looks directly at Webb with the calm, measured expression of someone who is about to deliver the constitutional education of a lifetime. Agent Webb, Judge Caprio says, his voice remaining perfectly controlled but carrying the full weight of judicial authority. Did you just flash your federal badge at a sitting state court judge to intimidate this court? Webb, still emboldened by what he mistakes for uncertainty, doubles down on his federal supremacy display. Your Honor, I'm simply clarifying the jurisdictional hierarchy that applies to federal law enforcement personnel. Judge Caprio nods slowly, as if carefully documenting Webb's constitutional violations for future reference. I see. Agent Webb, since you've questioned this court's understanding of federal jurisdiction and constitutional law, let me ask you some questions about your case and your understanding of the law you claim to represent. The judge opens a thick constitutional law volume that had been sitting on his desk. Agent Webb, you mentioned federal supremacy doctrine. Can you explain to this court the constitutional basis for federal supremacy as established in McCulloch v. Maryland? Webb hesitates, sensing he's walking into a constitutional ambush. Your Honor, federal authority generally takes precedence over state authority in matters of law enforcement. That's not what I asked, Agent Webb. Can you explain the specific constitutional principle established in McCulloch v. Maryland and how it applies to your traffic violation? Webb's confident demeanor begins to crack as he realizes he's being systematically outmatched by someone who knows constitutional law far better than he does. Your Honor, I believe the principle is that federal law supersedes state law. Agent Webb, Judge Caprio interrupts, his voice gaining authority. McCulloch v. Maryland established the principle that federal law is supreme only within the scope of federal constitutional authority. It does not establish that federal employees are exempt from state laws that fall within state police powers. Traffic safety is explicitly a state police power under the 10th Amendment. The arrogance starts draining from Webb's face as he realizes he's being constitutionally dismantled by a judge who knows federal law better than he does. Furthermore, Agent Webb, you claim that federal agents operate under different legal frameworks. Are you familiar with the Supreme Court decision in United States v. Bass, which specifically addresses the scope of federal law enforcement authority? Webb's mouth opens and closes as he realizes he's completely out of his constitutional depth. I'll take your silence as confirmation that you're not familiar with that precedent. United States v. Bass establishes that federal law enforcement authority does not exempt federal agents from state laws that are within state constitutional powers when those agents are acting outside their official federal capacity. But Judge Caprio is just getting started. What he reveals next will completely destroy Webb's case and expose his fundamental ignorance of the very constitutional principles he claims to represent. Judge Caprio pulls out another document from his file. Agent Webb, since you flashed your federal badge at this court and claimed federal supremacy, I took the liberty of contacting the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility regarding proper protocol for federal agents appearing in state courts. Webb's face goes completely pale. He clearly hadn't expected his federal supervisors to be contacted. According to FBI Policy Manual, Section 5.4.2, federal agents are explicitly required to comply with all state and local laws when acting in their personal capacity. Were you aware of this policy, Agent Webb? The courtroom is dead silent as Webb realizes the scope of his professional and legal miscalculation. Your Honor. Yes, but I thought. Furthermore, Agent Webb, according to the FBI's Professional Responsibility Unit, Flashing federal credentials to intimidate state judicial proceedings constitutes abuse of federal authority and conduct prejudicial to the government. Does that sound familiar from your professional training? Webb tries to speak,